Are you aware of the stiff IRS penalties for failing to file certain international information returns? I'm Andrew Bosserman, founder and tax attorney at Boss Tax Law, and in this video, I'm going to briefly overview the penalties for failing to file certain international information returns. So, an international information return, and the ones I'm going to be talking about, are for failing to file three different forms. And those forms are 5471, Form 5472, and Form 8865. These three forms don't have tax computations on them, but instead they're information returns so the IRS can gather information about certain foreignly owned businesses and also if certain U.S. persons are owners of foreign businesses. So, for example, you're required to file Form 5471 or 8865, depending on the situation. But if you are a U.S. person, and that includes me individually or potentially one of my business entities or a trust or some other type of legal entity. If a U.S. person is an owner and meets certain thresholds and requirements of a foreign corporation or partnership. So if you meet those requirements, and that's a U.S. person owning a foreign business, then you may have to file Form 5471 or 8865 with your tax return. Form 5472, that's filed by a U.S. corporation that is owned by a foreign corporation or some other sort of entity or individual. So, and there are also ownership thresholds, but so the way to think about it, 5471 or 8865, that's a foreign business owned by U.S. Individuals or businesses, and 5472 is a U.S. business owned by foreigners. So in those situations, and if the owners meet certain requirements and thresholds, you're required to file those forms with the IRS so they have the information on it. And if you don't file them with the IRS, you're subject to some pretty stiff penalties. So if you don't file Form 5471 or 8865 timely, that is a $10,000 penalty. Plus, it can be $10,000 for every month that is delinquent if the IRS sends you a notice saying that you haven't filed it yet, and more than 90 days passes before you file it. So that penalty can max out at $60,000. Form 5472, if you don't file it, that's a $25,000 penalty. And if the IRS sends you a notice and you still don't correct it, you'll get assessed $25,000 for each additional month that it's delinquent. And that penalty has no maximum. So that can add up very quickly. So you definitely want to make sure, if you're required to file one of these international information returns, that you file it on time to avoid these penalties. But what happens if you are assessed one of these penalties? Well, first of all, first-time abatement applies to these penalties. And actually, recently I was successful at helping a business get a 5472 penalty abated. But generally, you can get first-time abatement, meaning it's kind of like a get-out-of-jail-free card. If it's your first penalty and you meet other requirements, such as you filed all required returns for the past 3 years, you weren't assessed any other penalties that haven't been abated, you're current with all of your filings and payments. If that is the case, then generally the IRS will waive or abate a penalty under first-time abatement. So that's a great way to get a penalty abated if you've been current and this is just your first mistake or you made an error by not filing it on time. If that doesn't apply to you, then you generally have to get the penalty abated under what's known as reasonable cause. And reasonable cause is a factual argument you make with the IRS with your situation. And essentially, in order to qualify, you have to have exercised, they call it ordinary business care. You have to have acted like a reasonable person would in this situation, but you nevertheless were unable to file your return for some reason outside of your control. So oftentimes these are things like death, illness, natural disasters, things outside your control, um, that you did the best you could to try to file on time, but you just couldn't. But there are other ways you can qualify for a reasonable cause as well, and I've been successful at arguing some of those in front of IRS appeals. But the important thing to note is that these penalties can add up quickly, and you want to definitely try to get them abated if you can, because it will save you a lot of money. Also, if a number of years have gone by and you realize, hey, I should have been filing these forms, but I haven't, there are special procedures to deal with the IRS to submit a number of delinquent returns. This is different than, voluntary disclosure programs. It's kind of similar, but it's different. But if you are in that situation, so you haven't filed returns, that you've been required to file these international information returns, or if you have been assessed a penalty, you should definitely reach out to an experienced tax professional like myself or someone else familiar with these international penalties, because there are special rules that apply, and you want to make sure you have someone knowledgeable to guide you through the process and help to get the penalties abated. So this was just a quick overview of the penalties related to Forms 5471, Forms 5472, and Forms 8865. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out.